My husband threw me out onto the street like trash after 16 years together. No money, no home, nothing. When I used the old card my father had left me, the bank manager's face went pale and he said, "Ma'am, quickly, you need to see this." What I discovered that day changed everything, and my ex-husband still has no idea what's coming for him. But before we continue, please check if you're already subscribed to the channel and drop a comment below. Where are you watching this video from? We love to see how far our stories travel. The rain was coming down hard when I walked out of the building for the last time. I hadn't brought an umbrella because I never imagined he would do something like this. 16 years of marriage, 16 years building a life beside Richard, and it all ended with him pointing to the door and telling me I had half an hour to get out. 30 minutes. I couldn't even process it properly. I had just returned from Denver, where I'd spent 3 weeks taking care of my mother after she'd had a stroke. I was exhausted, just wanting to be home, dreaming of sleeping in my own bed. When I put the key in the lock and it didn't work, I thought it had just been demagnetized. I rang the doorbell. Richard opened the door with a cold expression I had never seen before. He was wearing that designer shirt I had given him for his birthday, but there was a lipstick stain on the collar. A wine red lipstick, not my shade. "You're back?" That was all he said. I felt my stomach clench. Something was wrong. Very wrong. "Why isn't the key working?" I asked, still not understanding. "Because I changed the locks." He said it so casually that I thought I'd misheard. But then a woman's laughter echoed from inside, coming from our bedroom. A young, lively voice without a hint of shame. "Richie, who is it? If it's the doorman, tell him to get lost." She appeared at the doorway wearing my silk robe. The robe I bought in Paris. That outrageously expensive robe Richard had complained I'd spent too much on. And now it was on the body of a girl who couldn't have been more than 25. I recognized her face. A digital influencer. One of those who post pictures on yachts and in fancy restaurants. Chloe something. She had nearly 200,000 followers on Instagram. She looked me up and down. My wrinkled jeans from the trip. My simple blouse. My hair thrown up haphazardly. And she gave a smug little smirk. A venomous smile. "Oh, it's just his ex-wife," she said, turning to Richard. I thought it was something important. Ex-wife. The word cut like glass. "Richard, what is going on?" My voice came out shaky. "Who is this girl? Why is she in our house wearing my things?" He sighed as if I were being inconvenient, as if I were a problem he needed to solve quickly so he could get back to something more interesting. "It's over, Amelia. There is no us anymore." Just like that. 16 years summed up in 7 words. "What do you mean it's over? I was taking care of my mom. You said everything was fine, that I could stay as long as I needed, and I was being polite," he replied, with that tone of superiority I had grown to hate in recent years. "But the truth is, this hasn't been working for a long time. You got stuck, Amelia. You became a boring housewife. I need someone who can keep up with me, who understands my life." "What?" I glanced at Chloe, who was now scrolling through her phone with disinterest, as if this conversation was too tedious to deserve her attention. "Since when?" I managed to ask. 8 months, he answered without hesitation. "Chloe understands me in a way you never did. 8 months. While I was waking up early to make his coffee just the way he liked it, while I was organizing his company parties, while I was pretending not to notice he was growing more distant, he had already replaced our entire life with another woman. "Come downstairs with me," Richard ordered. "Let's handle this civilly, without a scene." He led me to the elevator. We went down in silence. In the lobby of the building where we had lived for 10 years, in the exclusive part of town where I greeted the neighbors every day, every morning, he took me to a discreet corner away from prying eyes. "I already filed for divorce 3 weeks ago," he said, pulling an envelope from his pocket. "It's all here, signed and filed. The apartment is in my name. The cars too. The joint accounts, I've already emptied them. My world spun. You can't do that. I have rights." Rights? He laughed. Amelia, you haven't worked in 10 years. You've been living off me all this time. If you want to fight in court, go ahead, but you'll spend what you don't have on lawyers and lose anyway. Just accept it and move on. The doorman approached, bringing my suitcase. That old suitcase I had used for the trip to Denver. Richard took it and placed it at my feet with indifference. Your clothes are in there. I threw the rest out. It was all useless anyway. I looked at the suitcase. 16 years fit into one worn-out suitcase. You can't just leave me with nothing, I whispered, feeling the tears start to burn. Richard, please. If you don't make a scene, maybe I'll give you some financial help. A few $1,000s for you to go see your mother and stay there until you get yourself together. A few $1,000s, as if that could compensate for 16 years of my life. Some people in the lobby stopped to watch. Whispers, pitying glances. Richard noticed and got irritated. Stop making a scene, he said, raising his voice. Security. 2 security guards approached. I knew both of them, Mr. Raoul and Mr. Pepe, who always greeted me kindly. Now they were here to escort me out. I'm sorry, Mrs. Amelia, Mr. Raoul said softly, taking my suitcase. We don't want to do this, but... I understand. I cut him off, trying to maintain some dignity. I looked back one last time. Richard was already heading back to the elevator, phone to his ear, probably talking business with someone, as if I had never existed. The glass doors of the building closed behind me, sealing me off from 16 years of my life. I stood there on the sidewalk under the rain that was now falling harder, with an old suitcase and an envelope full of papers that made my humiliation official. The world kept moving around me, cars passing, people running to shelter from the rain, the city indifferent to my despair. I started walking aimlessly, dragging the suitcase through the wet streets. I couldn't go back to Denver in this state. My mother was still recovering, too fragile to handle this news. I had no close friends. I'd lost touch with all of them when I got married, completely absorbed into Richard's world. Night fell quickly. The city lights came on, bright storefronts, full restaurants, laughing couples. I was invisible, a wet and lost shadow. I went into a cheap diner and ordered a coffee. I opened my wallet. I had $47. It was all I had left in the world. $47. Not even enough for one night in a decent hotel. My phone was at 5% battery. I opened the banking app, my hands shaking. The joint account Richard and I had was at 0. He had taken every last cent, including the money I had before we married, a small inheritance from my grandmother. Everything. He took everything. I felt the urge to scream, to cry, to break something. But I could only sit there, staring at that screen with a 0 balance, as reality crashed down on me like an overwhelming weight. I was alone. No money, no home, no one. That's when I saw the card. It was hidden in the deepest compartment of my wallet, behind an old photo of my father. The card was dark blue, a bit faded at the edges, with the logo of a bank I didn't even remember still existed. Heartland Trust Bank. I took the card with trembling fingers. The last time I had seen it was 16 years ago when my father gave it to me before I got married. I remembered the conversation as if it were yesterday. We were in his small office in our hometown, surrounded by stacks of papers and the smell of old coffee. My father owned a hardware store. Nothing huge, but enough to live well. Amelia, he had said, in that serious tone he used when he wanted to say something important. This is an account I opened for you a long time ago. Don't use it unless you really need to. It's not for normal expenses, you understand? How much is in there, Dad? I had asked, curious. He just smiled, that mysterious smile that meant he knew more than he was letting on. Enough. But keep it as a last resort. As long as you're swimming along just fine, you don't need this life raft. But if the ship starts to sink, he paused. Hold on to it tight. I had put the card away and completely forgotten about it. After all, Richard was successful. We had a comfortable life. I never imagined I would one day need a life raft. Now, sitting in that cheap diner with less than $50 in my pocket and a life in ruins, my father's card was my only hope. Maybe there were a few $1,000s in there, enough for a bus ticket to Denver and a few months' rent on a simple little room. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I paid for the coffee and left. The rain had stopped, but the air was cold and damp. I needed to find a branch of Heartland Trust Bank. I took out my phone. 3% battery now. I searched. There was a branch about 20 minutes away. It opened at 9 a.m. I looked at the clock. It was almost 11 p.m. I would have to wait until the next day. I spent the night at a bus stop hugging my suitcase, trying not to sleep for fear of being robbed. The cold seeped into my bones. Some people passed by and looked at me with pity or disdain. A woman stopped and offered me a sandwich. I accepted, swallowing my pride along with the food. When the first glimmer of dawn appeared, I got up and went to a public restroom. I washed my face. I tried to fix my hair. I straightened my clothes. I wanted to look at least minimally presentable to go into the bank. At 9 a.m. sharp, I was in front of the branch. It was an old but well-maintained building. Very little foot traffic. I went in and took a number. I was called almost immediately. The teller was young. He couldn't have been more than 25. His name tag read, James. He smiled professionally. "Good morning. How can I help you?" I placed the faded card on the counter. I've forgotten the password. I wanted to check the balance. James took the card and his eyes widened slightly. "Wow, this is a very old card, a model from about 20 years ago." He typed some data into the computer. "Can I see your ID?" I handed over my driver's license with trembling hands. He typed some more. The screen took a long time to process. James frowned. "How strange," he muttered. My heart raced. "What's wrong? Is it blocked? Is there a debt?" "No, it's not that." He looked at me, then at the screen, then at me again. "It's just, this card is linked to a special account, a business account, and it has a security code I've never seen before." "Business?" I didn't understand. My father had a small hardware store, not a big company. "Just a moment." James stood up abruptly. "I need to call the manager. This is above my access level." He disappeared through a side door. I sat there, feeling a mix of fear and hope. Was there a problem? Had my father left debts? A few minutes later, a man in his 50s appeared. Graying hair, reading glasses hanging around his neck, a serious expression. His name tag read, Gerard Davies, manager. He looked at me differently, with respect. "Mrs. Amelia Hayes?" he asked, checking my ID. "Yes, please, follow me to my office. We need to talk in private." My heart was beating so hard it felt like it would burst out of my chest. I took my suitcase and followed him to a small office with frosted glass walls. He closed the door and offered me water. "Mrs. Hayes," he began, sitting behind the desk, "the account linked to this card is a very special account." "Special how?" He took a deep breath, as if trying to find the right words. "Your father, Charles Hayes, opened a corporate structure 23 years ago, a family holding company called Seawood Investments. He deposited and invested money religiously for years, with a very specific clause." I was completely lost. "What kind of clause?" Mr. Davies turned the monitor towards me. The screen showed an account with numbers that made no sense to me. So many zeros. The clause stated that you would only have full access to this account under one of two conditions, either upon your father's passing or when you found yourself in a situation of extreme financial need. My throat went dry. Extreme need. Your father was very specific. He programmed the system so that if you use this card after years of inactivity, and if your personal accounts were at zero, it would automatically trigger the transfer of control to you. I stared at the screen. Those numbers, they couldn't be real. How much is in there? My voice came out as a whisper. Mr. Davies adjusted his glasses. In total, considering investments, stocks, funds, and the cash in the current account, We're talking about approximately $1.2 million. The world stopped. $1.2 million. This can't be true, I managed to say. My father had a small hardware store. He sold nuts, bolts, basic supplies. Apparently, he was also a very good investor, Mr. Davies said, with a small smile, and for a very long time. Compound interest works miracles when you have patience and discipline. He opened a drawer and took out a large envelope, yellowed with time. Your father left this for you, with instructions that it only be delivered when the account was activated. I took the envelope with trembling hands. My name was written on the front in my father's steady handwriting. You can open it, Mr. Davies said kindly. I'll give you some privacy. He left the office. I sat there alone, holding that envelope as if it might explode. I carefully tore the edge and pulled out several sheets of paper. The first was a letter, handwritten. My dearest Amelia, if you're reading this, it means either something went very wrong or I'm no longer here. Either way, I want you to know that everything I did was with your future in mind. I grew up poor, sweetheart. Very poor. I saw my mother suffer because she didn't have money for food. I saw good women destroyed by bad men because they had no choice, because they depended on them for everything. When you were born, I swore that you would never go through that you would always have a choice. I worked hard my whole life. The hardware store made a profit, but it wasn't just that. I invested every spare penny. I taught myself, reading books, studying the market. I made mistakes, but I learned from them. I created this holding company in secret because I didn't want any man to come after you for your money. I wanted you to choose for love, not for need. But I also wanted you to have something to fall back on if you ever needed it. The extreme need clause was intentional. If you're reading this now, it's because you're going through something difficult. And I want you to know you are not alone. I took care of you even after I'm gone. Use this money wisely, not for revenge, but to build your own life. A free life where you depend only on yourself. Be strong, my daughter. You are always stronger than you imagined. With all my love, your dad. Tears fell onto the paper, smudging some of the words. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of gratitude, of love, of understanding. My father had protected me even after his death. I wiped my eyes and took a deep breath. Mr. Davies returned to the office carrying more papers. There are some decisions that need to be made, he said. The holding company has shares in several companies, investment funds, and a small rural property in Vermont. Everything needs your signature now that you are the legal owner. I looked at those papers. Each one represented years of my father's silent work. Years planning for my future while I lived my life, oblivious. I need 3 things right now, I said, surprised by the firmness in my own voice. Mr. Davies picked up a pen. Tell me. First, I need cash. I literally have nothing. We can make an immediate withdrawal of up to $5,000. Anything more requires prior notice. $2,000 is fine. Second, I need a safe place to stay. A discreet hotel where my ex-husband can't find me if he looks. Mr. Davies nodded. I know a hotel that accepts corporate bookings. Discreet, secure, no questions asked. And third, I paused. I need a lawyer. The best divorce lawyer you know. Someone who isn't afraid to fight rich people. Mr. Davies smiled. For the first time, a genuine smile. I know just the person, Eleanor Vance. She's relentless, specializes in asset division cases where one spouse tries to hide wealth. Perfect. I left the bank 3 hours later with a purse containing $2,000 in cash, 3 corporate credit cards, a stack of documents about my new assets, and the number for Eleanor Vance written on a piece of paper. I was not the same woman who had walked in. My first stop was a clothing store. Nothing extravagant, but clean, new clothes that made me feel human again. I bought 2 pairs of pants, 3 blouses, underwear, a light jacket, and a pair of comfortable shoes. I changed right there in the dressing room and threw the old clothes in the trash. Then I went straight to the hotel Mr. Davies had recommended. It was discreet, as promised. A renovated old building, no flashy doorman, a sober entrance. I checked in under the holding company's name as a corporate entity. The room was small but clean. Hot shower, firm bed, silence. I took the longest shower of my life, letting the hot water wash away all the grime, fear, and humiliation of the last 24 hours. When I got out of the shower, I looked at myself in the steamy mirror. My face was still tired, but my eyes had something different, a determination that wasn't there before. I called Eleanor's number. Vance Associates, a professional female voice, answered. "I'd like to speak with Ms. Vance. It's urgent. Ms. Vance is in a meeting. May I take your contact information? Please tell her it's Amelia Hayes. Gerard Davies from Heartland Trust Bank recommended me. It's about a divorce case with hidden assets." There was a pause. Just a moment. Less than a minute later, another voice came on. Deeper, firmer. "Amelia, this is Eleanor Vance. Gerard called me earlier. I'm aware of the situation. Can we meet today?" Today? I was surprised by the speed. The faster we start, the better. Your husband thinks you have no resources to fight back. As long as he believes that, we have an advantage. Can you come to my office in 2 hours? I can. Excellent. Bring all the documents you have about the marriage, assets, joint accounts, everything. And Amelia? Yes? You did the right thing by calling me. We're going to get back what's yours. I hung up the phone with my heart pounding. For the first time in 2 days, I felt something that wasn't despair. It was anger. Anger for being used, discarded, humiliated. And anger was a much better fuel than fear. I gathered all the papers I had, the marriage certificate, copies of old bank statements, the envelope Richard had given me with the settled divorce. I put everything in a folder and headed to Ms. Vance's office. The office was in a commercial building in downtown Chicago, 9th floor. The waiting room was modern, with gray walls and well-kept plants. The receptionist offered me coffee while I waited. It wasn't even 5 minutes. A woman in her mid-40s, dark hair in a bun, thick-rimmed glasses, and an impeccable suit, appeared at the door. "Amelia," she extended her hand. "Eleanor Vance. Let's talk." We went into a spacious room with a large desk covered in legal books and a computer. The walls were lined with diplomas and certificates. Eleanor was clearly someone who knew what she was doing. She sat down, took a pen and a notepad. "Tell me everything from the beginning," I told her. How I had met Richard in college, how he was charming and ambitious, how we got married shortly after I graduated, how he convinced me not to work, saying he wanted to provide for me, that I deserved a comfortable life, how over the years I lost my independence, my friends, my identity. I told her about my sick mother, my trip to Denver, about coming back to find another woman in my house, about being thrown out with a suitcase and less than $50 in my pocket. Eleanor jotted everything down, without interrupting. When I finished, she placed the pen on the desk and looked me straight in the eye. "Your ex-husband made several serious mistakes." "Mistakes?" "First, he filed for divorce without your signature. That invalidates the entire process. Second, he emptied joint accounts without your knowledge or authorization. That's a crime. Third, there are assets acquired during the marriage to which you are legally entitled to half." I felt a surge of hope. But he said everything is in his name, and it probably is. Men like your ex-husband are smart. They put everything in their own name. Sometimes they use shell companies, nominee accounts, but that doesn't matter. Eleanor smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of a predator, seeing its prey. What matters is that he underestimated you, and that's going to cost him dearly. What are we going to do? Eleanor opened her laptop. First, we're going to nullify the fraudulent divorce he filed. That gives us grounds to file a real process where you will have a voice. Second, we're going to investigate all his assets, companies, accounts, properties, investments, everything. I have contacts who do that kind of search. Won't that be expensive? It is. But from what Gerard told me, you have resources now, and I can guarantee you it will be worth every penny. I signed the retainer agreement right there. Eleanor explained that the process would be long. It might take months, but we had a real chance of getting a fair settlement. In the meantime, she said, you need to keep your new assets an absolute secret. If your ex-husband finds out you have resources, he will try to get to that money somehow. Men like him don't like to lose. He won't find out, I said firmly. My father made sure this was kept secret, and it will stay that way. Excellent. Oh, and Amelia, yes, prepare yourself psychologically. When we file the court applications, when Richard realizes you haven't given up, he will try to intimidate you. He'll send messages, maybe try to find you. He'll make threats. It's the pattern. I'm prepared. But was I really? I spent the next few days in a strange routine. In the mornings, meetings with Eleanor and her team. They discovered that Richard owned 3 apartments, besides the one where we lived, all rented out. They discovered accounts in 2 different banks, investments in startups, even a small stake in a famous restaurant. All hidden, all in his name or in the names of companies he controlled. He's been preparing for this for years, Eleanor said, showing me the documents, systematically cutting you out of the financial game. It's a classic case of economic abuse. Economic abuse. I had never heard that term, but it made sense. Richard had made me dependent on him, on purpose, and now he thought he could get rid of me without consequences. In the afternoons, I met with Mr. Davies at the bank to better understand my own investments. My father's holding company had shares in solid companies, fixed income funds, even some cryptocurrencies he had bought years ago that were now worth a fortune. Your father was a visionary, Mr. Davies said with admiration. He understood the market better than many professionals. A week after being thrown out of my home, I was sitting in a cafe near the old building where I used to live. I hadn't gone back there, but I needed to see it. I needed to confirm for myself that this was real, that it wasn't a nightmare. The cafe had a view of the building's entrance. I ordered a cappuccino and pretended to read a book while I watched. Richard came out around 10 in the morning, dressed to impress, as always. Chloe was by his side, clinging to his arm, laughing loudly at something. She was wearing an expensive dress I recognized from a shop window I had seen last week. It cost almost $10,000. He was keeping her in the same way he had kept me. The difference was that she was young, beautiful, visible, a trophy for him to show off. I felt a pang of something that wasn't exactly jealousy. It was pity. Pity for her, for not knowing that one day she would be discarded too. Pity for him, for being so empty that he needed constant external validation. My phone rang. It was Eleanor. Amelia, we have news. I got a court order to temporarily freeze Richard's accounts. The judge accepted our arguments about the illegal emptying of the joint accounts. You froze his accounts? All the ones we could identify so far. He can't move anything until the process is judged. And there's more. We filed the request to annul the fraudulent divorce. He'll receive the notification today. I looked out the cafe window. Richard and Chloe were getting into an imported car, laughing with no idea what was about to happen. Perfect, I said. Thank you, Eleanor. It's just the beginning. Now comes the interesting part. I hung up and watched their car disappear around the corner. The game had begun, and this time I had aces up my sleeve that he couldn't even dream existed. The legal notice reached Richard on a Tuesday morning. I know because Eleanor called me as soon as the court officer confirmed delivery. He received it personally, she said with satisfaction in her voice, and from the reports he didn't take it well. How so? Let's just say he got agitated. He tried to convince the officer that everything was settled, that the divorce was already finalized. When he realized that wouldn't work, he started yelling. I pictured the scene. Richard losing control, that mask of superiority cracking. I felt a small but real satisfaction. And now he has 20 days to respond. He'll probably hire an expensive lawyer and try to negotiate. But Amelia, you must be prepared. He will try to contact you. She was right. 3 hours later, my phone started ringing. Richard. I declined. It rang again. I declined. Messages started popping up on WhatsApp. Amelia, we need to talk. This is a misunderstanding. Call me. You're being manipulated by those lawyers. They just want your money. How funny. He thought I had hired lawyers with what money exactly? He still thought I was destitute, desperate. I didn't reply to any messages. Eleanor had advised me not to have direct contact. Everything had to go through the lawyers. The messages became more aggressive. You're going to regret this. You'll lose and end up in debt. I gave you a good life for 16 years. You owe me this. I blocked the number, but he didn't give up. He got another number and kept trying. Chloe is asking if you're okay. She's worried about you. This made me laugh out loud, alone in my hotel room. Chloe? Worried about me. Right. I blocked the second number too. That night I received a call from an unknown number. I answered by mistake, thinking it was from Eleanor's office. Amelia, it was his voice. Calmer now, controlled. That tone he used when he wanted to convince me of something. How did you get this number? I have my contacts. We need to talk. In person. We have nothing to talk about. Talk to my lawyer. Amelia, don't be ridiculous. Those lawyers are using you. You don't have the money to afford a legal battle with me. You'll end up on the street for real. I took a deep breath. I couldn't let him get to me. I'm well advised. Thanks for your concern. Advised with what money? He laughed. You think I don't know you were sleeping on the street? Mr. Raoul told me. Mr. Raoul, the security guard. Of course. Richard had eyes everywhere. If you call me again, I will file a harassment complaint. I hung up before he could reply. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, but from rage. He still believed he had power over me, that he could intimidate me. I called Eleanor and told her about the calls. Perfect, she said. Save all those messages, screenshots of everything. This proves harassment and attempted coercion. It helps our case. Can he find out about my money? Not through legal channels. Your holding company is under banking secrecy, registered only in your name. Unless you tell someone, there's no way for him to know. But paranoia started to creep in. What if he hired a private investigator? What if he found out somehow? Mr. Davies reassured me when I called the next day. Your financial structure is protected. Your father made sure of that. The holding company doesn't appear in public records. The investments are in separate corporate accounts. Even an investigator would have a hard time tracing it. Still, I decided to be more careful. I moved to an even more discreet hotel. I started varying my schedules and routes. Maybe it was overkill, but I didn't want to take any chances. 2 weeks after the notification, Eleanor called me for an urgent meeting. Richard hired a big firm, Marquez Silvera. They're expensive and aggressive. Is that bad? Not necessarily. Big firms are sometimes more concerned with reputation and prefer settlements. But it also means he's taking this seriously. She placed some papers on the desk. They sent a settlement proposal. I took the documents. Richard was offering $25,000 as a final settlement. No asset division, no rights to the properties or companies. Just a lump sum paid over 24 months. It's an insult, Eleanor said. You're legally entitled to much more than that. The assets acquired during the marriage are worth at least $400,000. Half of that is yours, so we reject it. Exactly. And we're going to counterattack. We've just completed the full assessment of his assets. We found more interesting things. She opened her laptop and showed me a detailed spreadsheet. In addition to the properties and accounts we already knew about, they had discovered that Richard had stakes in a construction company, shares in 2 real estate developments, and even a ranch in Vermont that was in the company's name. Was all this acquired during the marriage? I asked. No. Some of it was before, but it grew a lot during. And by law, the growth of assets during the marriage is divided. She showed me complex calculations, projections, comparisons. My head was spinning with so many numbers. How much do you think we can get? Eleanor smiled. If we win everything we're asking for, between $150,000 and $250,000, plus a compensatory pension for the years you dedicated to the marriage and gave up your career, $150,000 to $250,000. Added to what I already had from my father, it would be a significant sum. It wasn't about the money, I kept telling myself. It was about justice. It was about not letting him get away with treating me like trash. Let's move forward, I said. That night, alone in the hotel, I thought about calling my mother. She deserved to know what was happening, but her health was still fragile, and I didn't want to worry her. Instead, I wrote a letter I would never send, telling her everything. About Richard, about the divorce, about my dad's money, about the legal battle. Writing helped organize my thoughts, to process everything that was happening. When I finished, it was 3 a.m. I folded the letter and put it in my suitcase. The process continued. Hearings, document submissions, expert evaluations. Richard tried to argue that the assets were protected by holding companies and corporations, that they weren't part of the marital property. But Eleanor was relentless, proving that the companies were just fronts, that the money came from work done during the marriage. At one of the hearings, I saw Richard in person for the first time since I left the house. He was impeccable, as always. Expensive suit and a confident posture. But when our eyes met, I saw something different. Uncertainty, anger, fear. Chloe was with him but stayed outside the courtroom. Through the window, I saw her on her phone, bored, probably posting a photo to Instagram. During the recess, Richard's lawyer approached Eleanor. My client is willing to increase the offer. $50,000, cash. Eleanor didn't even consult me. My client is not interested in settlements. We'll see you at the next hearing. The lawyer's face tightened. He went back and whispered something to Richard, who glared at me with pure hatred. I left the courthouse with Eleanor. Why didn't you even consider negotiating? I asked. Because they're scared. When they're scared, it's because we know more than they think. The more we press, the better the final outcome. And she was right. A week later, a new proposal, $100,000. We rejected it. $150,000. We rejected it. With each rejection, I saw Richard getting more desperate through the messages he insisted on sending from different numbers. You're being greedy. Those lawyers are manipulating you. You're going to destroy me out of pure revenge. Revenge. Maybe that was part of it. But it was also justice. And most importantly, it was reclaiming what was mine by right. The twist came from where I least expected it. It was Chloe who started to crack. Eleanor called me one afternoon with unexpected news. You're not going to believe this. Richard's girlfriend contacted my office. Chloe? Why? She wants to talk. She says she has relevant information for the case. Information about Richard that can help us. I didn't understand. Why would she do that? Isn't she with him? She was. Apparently, things got ugly. She wants to meet with you. She specifically asked to speak with you, not just me. I was silent for a moment, processing. Amelia, what do you think? It could be a trap. It could be. But it could also be useful. The decision is yours. I thought for a moment. I'll meet her. But in a public place, with you present. We agreed on a discreet cafe, far from Richard's usual circuit. I arrived 10 minutes early, nervous. Eleanor was already there at a table in the back. Chloe appeared on time. She looked different. No heavy makeup, no flashy designer clothes. Simple jeans, a basic blouse, hair in a ponytail. She looked smaller, younger, more fragile. She sat down and was silent for a moment. "Thanks for agreeing to see me," she finally said. I didn't respond. I just waited. "I know you hate me. You have every right. I was horrible to you." "You were." She sighed. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know the truth about you two." "The truth?" I couldn't help the sarcastic tone. "The truth is you were sleeping with a married man. I know. But he told me you had been separated for months, that you knew about him and that everything was fine, that it was just a matter of time before the divorce went through. And you believed him? She blushed. I wanted to believe him. He was so convincing, so charming. He made me feel special. Her hands trembled around her coffee cup. But after you left, things changed. Eleanor leaned forward. How so? He started to control everything. My phone, my social media, where I went. He said it was because he loved me, because he was jealous. At first, I thought it was cute. She laughed humorlessly. How stupid was I? Why are you telling us this now? I asked. Chloe took a deep breath. Because he threw me out, the same way he threw you out, last week. He just said he didn't want me anymore, that I was being too needy, too dramatic. He sent me away with a suitcase and $100, so that was it. Richard had discarded her, too. And you want revenge? Eleanor said bluntly. I do, but I also want to do the right thing. Chloe looked at me. You didn't deserve what he did, and I helped him do it. I want to fix this. What kind of information do you have? I asked. Chloe pulled a flash drive from her bag. While I was there, he took work calls at home. I started paying attention, and I started recording. Eleanor took the flash drive as if it were gold. Recording what? Conversations he had about business. There's a building he's constructing on the south side. He used cheaper materials than what the city specified. And there are audio files of him arranging bribes with a city inspector to pass an inspection. Silence fell over the table. Eleanor paused. This is very serious. I know. When he threw me out, I was angry, but I was also scared. If he did this to you, to me, how many other people has he hurt? And those buildings of his, people live in those buildings. If he used bad materials, she was right. This went far beyond divorce and asset division. It was a crime. Why didn't you take this to the police? I asked. Because I'm afraid of him. He has expensive lawyers, contacts. I'm a nobody. But you... She looked at me. You're fighting him, and from what I've seen of the case, you're winning. I thought this might help. Eleanor examined the flash drive. I'll need a technician to verify the authenticity of these audio files, and you'll need to sign a document confirming that you were the one who recorded them in your own handwriting. I'll sign it, whatever it takes. We spent another hour at the cafe while Eleanor asked detailed questions. Chloe told us about secret accounts Richard mentioned, about meetings with shady businessmen, about suspicious cash payments he received that never went into the official accounts. When we finished, Chloe stood up to leave. She stopped and looked at me. I know this doesn't erase what I did. I don't expect your forgiveness, but I hope this helps. Why are you really doing this? I asked. The truth. She hesitated. Because when he threw me out, I understood what you must have felt, and nobody deserves that. Nobody. She left. I watched out the window as she disappeared into the crowd. What do you think? I asked Eleanor. I think we just received some heavy ammunition. If these audio files are authentic, Richard has much bigger problems than the divorce. She was right. 2 days later, the technician confirmed the audio files were genuine, unedited, and untampered with. The conversations were clear, Richard agreeing to use cheaper cement and pocketing the difference. Richard offering money to an inspector to approve a building that wasn't up to code. What do we do with this? I asked. Eleanor was silent for a moment. We have two options. We use it as leverage in the divorce to force a better settlement, or we turn it over to the authorities and let justice run its course. What do you recommend? Personally? Both. First, we use it as leverage. When we get our settlement, then we hand it over to the police. That way, you're financially protected, and he still answers for his crimes. It seemed calculating and cold, but it also seemed right. Let's do it. Eleanor scheduled a meeting with Richard's lawyers, in person, without revealing the reason. On the day of the meeting, we walked into a conference room at a neutral hotel. Richard was there with his 2 lawyers. When he saw me, his face twisted into a mix of rage and contempt. "You still haven't given up on this charade?" he said. "Sit down, Mr. Sterling," Eleanor said calmly. "We have a proposal." She placed a tablet on the table and pressed play. Richard's voice filled the room. "Use the cheaper cement. No one will know the difference. The profit margin doubles." His face went white. Eleanor paused the audio and looked at his lawyers. "We have 12 hours of audio like this, including bribery agreements, use of substandard materials, and discussions about tax evasion, all duly authenticated by an expert." One of Richard's lawyers stood up. "This is inadmissible as evidence. It was obtained illegally. It was obtained by a third party who was present during the conversations. Perfectly legal. And even if it's not used in the divorce proceedings, nothing prevents it from being handed over to the district attorney's office." Richard exploded. "Is this blackmail?" "No," Eleanor replied calmly. "It's negotiation. You have 2 options. First, we close a fair settlement agreement today. You transfer half of the marital assets, as determined by law, and we all move on with our lives. Second, you don't close the agreement. We deliver this material to the police today, and you face multiple criminal charges while still fighting in court over the asset division." Silence. Richard's lawyers looked at each other. One of them asked for a private moment with their client. We left the room. I stood nervously in the hallway. "Do you think it will work?" I asked Eleanor. "It will work. They have no choice." 15 minutes later, they called us back in. Richard was defeated, slumped in his chair, staring at the table. One of the lawyers spoke for him. "My client agrees to an equal division of the assets, half of everything acquired during the marriage, plus a compensation of $25,000 for moral damages." Eleanor looked at me. I nodded. "I accept, but I want everything in writing today, and the initial transfer of the properties to begin next week. We'll manage it." It took the rest of the day, but we left with a signed agreement, notarized and registered. Richard would transfer 2 apartments to me, half of his shares in the companies, and $140,000 in cash, paid over 6 months. In total, approximately $225,000. When we left the hotel, it was already dark. Eleanor hugged me. "You did it. You got justice." But it didn't feel like a victory. It just felt like the end of a chapter. "And the audio files?" I asked. "Tomorrow morning, I'm personally going to the district attorney's office. Richard will have to deal with that, too." I went back to the hotel, exhausted. I took a long shower and collapsed onto the bed. For the first time in months, I slept soundly. 2 days later, the news broke in the papers. Prominent real estate developer investigated for fraud and corruption. Richard's picture was on the front page, leaving the police station with a grim face. My phone rang. It was Chloe. "Did you see?" she asked. I saw. "Thank you for doing the right thing." "You helped?" There was a pause. "Are you okay?" "I am. And you?" "I went back to my parents' house in a small town. I'm starting over." "And you?" I looked around the hotel room that had been my home for the past few weeks. "I'm starting over too. With the agreement signed and the transfers beginning, I needed to make practical decisions about my life. I couldn't stay in a hotel forever. Mr. Davies helped me organize my finances. With the money from the settlement added to my father's inheritance, I had the resources to live comfortably for the rest of my life without working. But the idea of doing nothing made me uneasy. "What did you enjoy doing before you got married?" Mr. Davies asked during a meeting. I had to think. It had been so long. I studied architecture. I never practiced. But I always loved design, creating spaces. So why don't you go back to it? It seemed impossible. 16 years away from the profession. Everything had changed: software, trends, technologies. But the idea stuck in my head: architecture, creating beautiful and functional things, helping people have better homes. I decided the first thing I would design would be my own house, a place that was completely mine, with no bad memories, no associations with Richard. I spent weeks looking for land. I wanted something quiet but not too far from the city, a place where I could start fresh. I found a perfect plot in a gated community, 40 minutes from the city center. Lots of trees, a view of the mountains, silence. I bought it with cash. I hired an architect to help with the technical details, but the design would be mine. I spent hours sketching, imagining each room, each detail. I wanted a house filled with light, large windows, few walls integrated with the garden, an open, airy space where I could breathe. A large office because I was determined to go back to school to get updated. A library because I had always loved books, but Richard thought they took up too much space. A spacious kitchen because I had discovered I enjoyed cooking as a form of therapy in the hotel, and a comfortable guest room for my mother when she could come visit. The construction would take 8 months. In the meantime, I rented a small but cozy apartment in a charming neighborhood. I bought new furniture. Nothing too expensive, just enough to feel at home. It was strange at first, the loneliness. There was no one asking where I was, what I was doing when I was coming back. I was free, and freedom, I discovered, can be terrifying. I started therapy. A psychologist named Dr. Laura, who specialized in women coming out of abusive relationships. Yes, abusive. It took me a while to accept that term, but it was the truth. Richard had controlled me subtly for years, financially, emotionally, and socially. You're going to have to relearn who you are, Dr. Laura said in our first session, because you probably spent so much time being who he wanted you to be that you forgot who Amelia really is. And she was right. Simple things confused me. What kind of music I liked, what food I preferred, how I liked to spend my free time. I started experimenting. I went to art exhibitions alone. I watched movies Richard hated. I ate at restaurants he found too simple. I bought clothes he would have said didn't suit me. And little by little, I started rediscovering myself. I discovered I liked waking up early and walking in the park, that I loved jazz but had never listened to it because Richard only listened to electronic music, that I felt good in jeans and sneakers without needing to be always dressed up. I also decided to tell my mother everything. I traveled to Denver and spent a weekend with her. She was already better from the stroke, stronger. When I told her about the divorce, about Richard throwing me out, about my dad's money, she cried. I knew something was wrong, she said. Your father always distrusted Richard. He said he had cold eyes, but you seemed happy. So we didn't want to interfere. I thought I was happy, or I had convinced myself I was. She held my hand. Your father was very wise. He knew you might need that security one day. We sat in silence for a moment. He would do that for you too if he could, I said. I know. He was a good man. Before I left, I visited my father's grave. I brought flowers, and I stood there for a while. Thank you, Dad, I whispered. You saved me even after you were gone, and I promised to use this the right way, the way you would want. The months passed. The house took shape. I visited the construction site every week, following each stage. It was exciting to see something that had been born in my head become real. I started an online refresher course in architecture. It was challenging, but good. My brain was rusty, but slowly I got back into the rhythm. During that time, Richard completely disappeared from my life. I learned from the news that he was facing several lawsuits, from the construction company, from clients who had discovered the fraud, from the district attorney's office. Chloe also disappeared from social media. I hoped she was okay, rebuilding her life away from all that. One afternoon, I received a call from Eleanor. Amelia, we finalized all the transfers. The 2 apartments are in your name. The shares have been transferred and the final payment has been deposited into your account. Officially, your divorce is complete. Complete. 16 years of marriage summed up in bank transfers and paperwork. But I didn't feel sadness. I felt relief. That night, I made a list of everything that had happened in the last year, from the broken woman on the sidewalk to where I was now, a property owner with money in the bank, building my own home, going back to school. It wasn't the life I had planned, it was much better. 6 months after the settlement, I received the call I had been waiting for. "Amelia, the house is ready." The architect said, "You can move in whenever you want." I went there the same day. I walked through the front door and stood in the foyer, just feeling. It was perfect, exactly as I had imagined. Light pouring in from all sides, spacious but cozy rooms, every detail thought out with care. My house, my space, my new beginning. I moved in slowly, no rush. Each piece of furniture chosen carefully, each object with meaning. No ostentation, nothing to impress anyone. Just what made me happy. The day I hung the last picture on the living room wall, I sat on the sofa and looked around. I was home. Finally. A year after being thrown out of my house, my life was unrecognizable. The house was beautiful, with a garden I tended myself. I discovered I liked gardening, something therapeutic about caring for plants, watching them grow. I finished the architecture refresher course and started doing small freelance jobs. Nothing big, just renovation projects for acquaintances. But it was rewarding to use my creativity again to create spaces that made people happy. Mr. Davies suggested I do something more with my financial situation. You have resources. Why not invest in something that makes a difference? The idea stuck with me. A difference how? It was during a therapy session that I got the idea. "How many women are in the situation you were in?" Dr. Laura asked. "Trapped in bad relationships because they have no financial independence, no professional qualifications because they gave everything up for the marriage, no support network because they isolated themselves. Many. The answer was many. What if I could help? I thought out loud. What if I created something for women in that situation? The idea grew. I talked to Mr. Davies, to Eleanor, to other professionals, and slowly the project took shape. I created a nonprofit organization called New Dawn. The goal was to help women leaving abusive or difficult relationships rebuild their lives. We offered free legal support through a partnership with Eleanor's firm, professional training courses, financial guidance to learn how to manage money, and psychological support because I knew firsthand how important it was. I rented a small space in the city center, nothing fancy but functional. I hired a small team, a social worker, a psychologist, and an administrative coordinator. The project started small. In the first few weeks, we only helped 3 women. But word of mouth worked. In 2 months, we had a waiting list. The stories were similar to mine. Women who had been convinced to give up careers, to depend completely on their husbands, to erase themselves. Women who were now trying to rebuild from scratch. One of them was particularly impactful. Carmen, 38, 2 children. Her husband had controlled every penny that came into the house for 15 years. When she tried to leave, he threatened to leave her with nothing. Eleanor took the case. In 4 months, we managed to get not only a fair settlement, but also child support and a restraining order against the ex-husband who had become violent. Carmen took an administration course we offered. She got a job in a small company and was rebuilding her life. "You saved me," she told me one day, with tears in her eyes. "No," I replied. "You saved yourself. I just gave you the tools." The work at the NGO filled me in a way I never imagined. Every woman we helped was a victory. Every story of overcoming reminded me why it was worth it. I also started having a social life again. I made friends with other women from the NGO's volunteer group. We went out to dinner, we laughed, we talked about everything and nothing. One of them, Julia, became particularly close. She had been through a difficult divorce years ago and was now a lawyer specializing in family law. "You know you're an inspiration to many women, right?" she told me one night as we sipped wine on the terrace of my house. I was surprised. I didn't do anything extraordinary. "Amelia, you came back from rock bottom and created something beautiful. You not only rebuilt your life, but you're helping others rebuild theirs. That's incredible." I hadn't thought of it that way. To me, it was just doing what felt right. But slowly, I realized my story had power. I started giving talks at universities and women's groups, telling my experience, not to brag, but to show that it was possible to start over, no matter how lost a person felt. The talks led to more women seeking out the NGO. The project grew. We got sponsorships from some companies and donations from individuals. We expanded to 2 larger rooms and hired more professionals. One day, I received an unexpected message. It was from Chloe. "Hi, Amelia. I know you probably don't want to talk to me, but I wanted to tell you. I'm in college, studying psychology. I want to help women who have been through abusive relationships, like me and you. Thanks for showing me it's possible to start over," I replied. "Congratulations on college. I hope you achieve your dream. And if you need an internship in the future, look me up. There's always room for someone who wants to help." She replied with a heart emoji and a thank you. Forgiving doesn't mean forgetting, but it means not letting the past control your future. 2 years after the divorce, the NGO had already helped over 200 women. Some got fair divorces, others found jobs, others simply found the strength to leave bad situations. During that time, I avoided relationships. I wasn't ready, I didn't want to risk it again, but I didn't feel lonely. I had my mother, who now visited me frequently. I had my friends. I had my work. I had my house. One afternoon, I was at the NGO office reviewing some cases when the receptionist buzzed me. "There's a man here who wants to talk to you. He says it's personal." My heart froze. "Richard? After all this time? Who is it?" He said his name is David Guzman, a university professor. He says he wants to talk about a project. I breathed a sigh of relief. It wasn't Richard. David came in, a man in his late 40s, graying at the temples, reading glasses, a kind smile. A sociology professor, I discovered, who was researching women in situations of economic vulnerability. "I heard about the work of your NGO," he said. "It's impressive. I'd like to form a partnership, bring my students here to do volunteer work, to learn and practice about the social issues we study in theory." We talked for almost 2 hours. David was passionate about his work. He spoke with enthusiasm about education and social transformation. It was contagious. "I'd love that partnership," I said at the end. "When can we start? How about next week? I'll bring a group of students to see the space." "Perfect." He stood up to leave but hesitated at the door. "Amelia, can I ask you a personal question?" "You can. Would you be willing to have coffee sometime, not related to work? Just because I'd like to get to know you better." I was surprised. I didn't expect that. I don't know if I'm ready for that," I said honestly. He smiled without pressure. "No problem. The offer stands. If you change your mind, let me know." After he left, I kept thinking. It had been 2 years. Was I ready? I called Dr. Laura. "What do you think? Am I ready to try again?" She laughed softly. "Amelia, only you can answer that, but I'm going to ask you a question. Are you happy now?" "I am." "And would agreeing to go out with someone change that?" "Would you be less happy?" I thought. "Not necessarily. Then maybe the question isn't if you're ready, but if you want to. Do you want to get to know that person better? Did I want to?" I thought of David's kind smile, the way he spoke with passion about his work, the respect with which he had made the invitation. "I think so." "Then accept the coffee. It doesn't have to be anything more than a coffee." See how you feel. The following week, when David returned with the students, I told him yes, I would have coffee. We arranged for the following Saturday. The coffee with David was surprisingly normal. No pressure, no grand expectations. We talked about books, about work, about life. He told me about his amicable divorce years ago, about his 2 teenage sons he saw every weekend. There were no sparks, no drama. Just a pleasant conversation between 2 people who had been through difficult things and come out the other side. We went out other times, always without rush, without commitment. Sometimes to the movies, sometimes a simple dinner, sometimes just a walk in the park. It took me more than 6 months to introduce him to my mother. I was afraid of her reaction, afraid of making a mistake, but my mother liked him immediately. "He has kind eyes," she said after he left. "Not like the other one. This one is good." David never tried to rush me, never questioned why I was sometimes distant, why it was hard for me to trust completely. He was just there, patient, constant. "I'm in no hurry," he said one night. "I'm happy just being near you, on your time." That's what won me over. The respect, the patience, the complete absence of any attempt to control. A year after our first coffee, he moved into my house. It wasn't a dramatic decision. He practically already lived there, with half his clothes in the closet and his toothbrush in the bathroom. "It would be more practical if I just moved in for good," he suggested one morning over coffee. "It would," I agreed, and that was that. Simple, like the best things in life. The NGO kept growing. We opened a second unit in another part of the city. We secured a partnership with the state government to expand our services. More than 500 women had already been through our programs. I also created an emergency fund for women who needed to leave home urgently but had no resources. Temporary help to pay for rent, food, while they got organized. Exactly what I didn't have when I needed it. Sometimes, when I was at the NGO office, I would look around and couldn't believe I had built this. From nothing, from despair, something had been born that was changing lives. One afternoon, 3 years after the divorce, I received an unexpected call. It was a reporter from a national magazine. They wanted to do a feature on the NGO and on my story. I hesitated. I didn't like the exposure, talking about myself, but Julia convinced me. Think of how many women will read it and realize they're not alone, that they can leave, that there's help. I agreed to the interview. The feature came out 2 months later, cover of the magazine, From Ashes to a New Dawn, How Amelia Hayes Turned Pain into Purpose. I found the title a bit dramatic, but the article was good. It told my story without sensationalism. It talked about the NGO. It included testimonials from women we had helped. What I didn't expect was the fallout. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Calls from TV shows wanting interviews, from other cities wanting to open NGO units, from women asking for help. And there was one specific call that surprised me. "Amelia, it's me, Chloe. We hadn't spoken in over a year. Hi, is everything okay?" I read the article. It's beautiful. And I wanted to tell you, I graduated with a degree in psychology, and I was wondering if the internship offer still stands. I smiled. "It does. When can you start?" "Next week? Perfect. Welcome to the team." Chloe became one of the best professionals at the NGO. She understood from her own experience what these women were going through. She could connect with them in a unique way. One day, having coffee in the office kitchen, she said to me, "You know, sometimes I think about the past and I feel so ashamed of what I did, of how I was. You were young. You were manipulated too. I know, but still, I helped hurt you. And you not only forgave me, but you gave me a chance. People make mistakes, Chloe. What matters is what we do after." She wiped away a tear. "Thank you for everything." That night at home, David was cooking while I corrected some renovation projects I had taken on. Freelance work was still something I did for pleasure, not for need. "Are you happy?" he asked suddenly. I looked up. "What? Are you happy? With your life?" I thought about the question. I looked around my house. I thought about the NGO, about the women we were helping, about my friendships, about my mother who was healthy and visited regularly. I looked at David, who was looking at me with such affection. "I am," I replied with certainty, "happier than I ever imagined possible." He smiled. "I'm glad to hear that." That night, before sleeping, I took out the letter my father had written years ago. It was already yellowed, with creases from being folded and unfolded many times. I reread his words. "Use this money wisely, not for revenge, but to build your own life." I looked around. I had done exactly that. I hadn't used the resources to destroy Richard, although he had destroyed himself with his crimes. I had used them to rebuild myself, to build something bigger than me, to help others. "I hope you're proud, Dad," I whispered. "I think I used the gift you gave me well." I put the letter back in the drawer and turned off the light. Tomorrow would be another day. More women to help, more stories to hear, more lives to transform. And I was ready. 5 years after that terrible day I was thrown out of my house, my life was a testament to the power of starting over. The New Dawn NGO now had 4 units spread across the metropolitan area. We had a team of 23 professionals, lawyers, psychologists, social workers, and training course instructors. We had already helped over 1,200 women rebuild their lives. My work as an architect also flourished in an unexpected way. I began to specialize in affordable housing projects, working with NGOs and cooperatives to create dignified spaces for low-income people. It was rewarding to use my talent for something that truly mattered. I married David in a simple ceremony, just family and close friends. Nothing ostentatious, nothing to impress anyone, just people we loved, celebrating a love that had grown slowly with respect and true partnership. This time, I kept my financial independence, not out of distrust, but out of wisdom. I had separate accounts, my investments in my name, and David not only supported this, but encouraged it. "You fought hard for your independence," he said. "I would never ask you to give it up." That's when I knew I had chosen correctly. My mother, now in stable health, moved into a small house I bought near mine. I saw her almost every day, and that healed something inside me. Lost time recovered. As for Richard, I heard through the grapevine that he had lost practically everything. The investigations revealed a web of fraud much larger than we had imagined. He was convicted, he served his time, and today he was living in a small town in a different state, working in an accounting office. His life of ostentation was over. I didn't feel joy at his downfall, just a sense of justice served. He had hurt many people. I was just one of them. Now he was paying the price. One morning, I was at the NGO office when our receptionist buzzed me about an unexpected visitor. "There's a woman here. She says you'll want to see her." When I saw who it was, I froze. It was Veronica, my best friend from college, whom I'd lost touch with when I married Richard. "Amelia," she said with tears in her eyes, "I saw the article about you, about everything that happened. I'm so sorry. I should have stayed in touch. I should have realized." I hugged her. "It wasn't your fault. I isolated myself. I'm the one who should be sorry." We talked for hours. She told me about her life, her happy marriage, her 2 children. I told her about my journey, about falling and getting back up, about finding purpose in pain. "You were always strong," Veronica said, "even when you didn't realize it." We rekindled our friendship as if 15 years hadn't passed. Some true connections withstand time and distance. On the 5th anniversary of the NGO, we held a big event. We invited all the women we had helped over the years. Over 300 attended. Each one had a story of overcoming. Women who now had their own businesses, established careers, safe homes. Women who had escaped violent relationships and were now independent and happy. During the event, Carmen, the first woman we helped, asked to speak. 5 years ago, I was lost, aimless, without hope. I thought I could never get out of that hole. And then I met Amelia and the New Dawn team. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. "You didn't just help me legally and financially. You showed me that I had value, that I deserved more. Today, I'm an administrative manager at a company. I live in my own house, and my children are safe and happy. None of this would be possible without you." When she finished, the whole room gave a standing ovation. I cried. Not from sadness, but from gratification. That night, at home with David, we sat on the terrace with wine and were silent for a while, just looking at the stars. "You saved a lot of lives," he said. "I didn't save anyone, I just gave them tools. They saved themselves. Still, you transformed your pain into something beautiful." Not everyone can do that. I thought about his words. It was true. I could have become bitter. I could have become cynical. I could have used my resources just to get revenge on Richard. Instead, I chose to build. I chose to help. I chose to turn the trash into a garden. You know what I learned from all this? I said out loud. That it's not what happens to us that defines who we are. It's what we do with what happens. David held my hand, and you chose to do something incredible. Days later, I was reorganizing my home office when I found that old suitcase, the same one I was carrying the day I was kicked out. It was stored in the back of a closet, forgotten. I opened it carefully. Inside, the old clothes I wore that day, the envelope with the fraudulent divorce papers, and the faded blue card from my father. I took the card and ran my finger over the worn surface. That small piece of plastic had changed everything, not because of the money it represented, but because of the love it carried, because of the care of a father who wanted to protect his daughter even after his death. I decided to keep the card in a special way. I framed it along with my father's letter and hung it on my office wall, a daily reminder of where I came from, what I overcame, and the love that brought me here. Looking at the frame, I thought of all the Amelias I had been, the naive girl who married for love, the wife who slowly erased herself, the broken woman on the sidewalk, the survivor who got back up, the social entrepreneur, the happy and fulfilled woman I was today. All those Amelias were part of me, and all of them, in some way, were necessary for me to get here. My phone rang. It was Chloe from the office. Amelia, a woman just arrived, a story very similar to yours. Her husband threw her out of the house yesterday. She's desperate. Can you come talk to her? I'm on my way. I grabbed my keys and left. One more woman needing help. One more story of pain that could be transformed into a new dawn. And I would be there to help. Because I knew, better than anyone, that sometimes all a person needs is an outstretched hand in their darkest moment. And sometimes that outstretched hand comes from someone who was also in the darkness and found the light. I drove to the office with a full heart. My life wasn't perfect, but it was mine, built by me, with my choices, my values, my purpose. When Richard threw me onto the street believing he was destroying me, he was actually setting me free. He forced me to discover my own strength. He gave me the opportunity to become who I really was, not who he wanted me to be. And for that, in a strange way, I was even grateful. Because from the bottom of the pit, I didn't just climb, I flew. Now, if you like this story, click subscribe. And tell me in the comments, what part left you speechless? Oh, and don't forget to become a member to get access to exclusive videos I don't post here. I'll be waiting for you.